Holly here today for MarkerPop, and today we are using the Concord and 9th Hello Lovely stamp set. All month long, the design team is still focusing on watercolors, so we're going to go ahead and color this image in using the Gansai Tambi watercolors from Kiritaki. So I'm going to start out with a piece of Canson watercolor paper, and I'm just using a powder tool to de-static the piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my mini Misty to help me get the image in place. My piece of cardstock is cut a little bit over 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I think there's like a 1/4 inch extra around the size there. This stamp set's rather large, and I'm going to be taping it to a board, so I wanted to make sure I had some room to put the tape down. So once I have that image in there, I'm going to go ahead and use my Versamark ink, and I'm going to stamp that down onto the cardstock. And then I'm going to heat emboss it using some Hero Arts white embossing powder. I did have to do 2 impressions because my Versamark pad was a little dry. You want to make sure you definitely keep your Versamark pad nice and inked up. So once I have the embossing powder on, I'm going to go ahead and heat set it, and then I'm going to go ahead and tape it to my board using some painter's tape. Once my image is on there, I'm going to go ahead and get my watercolors out. I can't have them in focus, so I will put the number of what colors I'm using. I'm using a red, a purple, a pink, and 2 shades of green. Keeping it pretty simple today. So I'm going to start out by adding some clean water around the outside of my image. I'm actually starting with the background first today. I'm going to use a light blue wash. In this way, if anything gets on the images, you can just color over it. So I'm putting just clean water around the outside of the image, and then I'm dipping my paintbrush into the light blue color. And then I'm just bringing it in and dabbing it into the water that I already laid down, so it just kind of spreads out naturally. So I'm going to start out with one layer, and then I'm going to go in and add some darker to kind of help build and intensify. And you'll see me move the board around with the image being embossed in white. It's kind of hard to see where everything is, so I have to keep picking it up and getting it closer to me from the camera. And then I heat set in between each one to kind of speed up the process a little bit. And then here I'm going to start coloring in the image. Same thing, I'm just going to drop some water into the recessed areas that the embossing creates, and then I'm going to pick up my color and drop it in. And just kind of let it spread around on its own. Now these watercolors are very pigmented. Very pigmented. I'm using them directly from the actual pan, so I'm just taking my paintbrush in and picking up a little bit of the color. I would normally recommend, if you're just starting out with these watercolors, would be to get a piece of clear acetate or a watercolor palette and take some of the color on your paintbrush and then put it on the palette and kind of spread it around a little bit to kind of, I guess, soften it up and build your colors, because these colors are very intensifying. And once you can see here on some of my green leaves, the color's kind of dark, and I noticed that when they dry, they'll dry kind of thick, and if you were to get any kind of a water on it, or if you were to touch it with your fingers, the color comes up. So the color does tend to move even though it's dry, and it just kind of pulls up in a dark spot. So you want to work with these watercolors very light to start with, and then build up your color gradually. Other than that, it's a very good set of watercolors. I mean, it's very smooth, the colors are very vibrant, and like I said, using a watercolor palette, you can get light tones all the way up to your dark tones from one set of watercolors. And they do come with a really cool, depending on which set you get, I believe there's 4 sets of them. They have a white shimmer, and some have a silver and a copper, so you can get a really variety of the shimmery watercolors in it as well. So here I'm just going to heat set in between this as well, and I'm just taking my paintbrush into the water, dampening it, dabbing it on a paper towel, and then going into my watercolors. And then each time I am putting clear water down first. So like here with the flower image, I put the clear water down first, and then I picked up the pink, and then I just dropped it in. And then once that's dry, I go in again with another layer to kind of add some highlights or shadows, just to give it some depth in the design of the flower. So I'm going to go ahead and finish coloring up the image, and you'll see me use some other colors, some yellow and some purple, and then once I'm all done with that, we'll come back and we'll finish the card. So now that we're all finished with the watercoloring, we're going to go ahead and remove the tape very carefully. So just kind of pulling it back on itself. And please excuse the fire trucks in the background if you guys can hear that through the microphone. So once I have the image off, I'm going to go ahead and trim it up, and I'm going to trim it up to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 to just fit standard size A2 size top folding card base. And with leaving that little extra edge around it, you were able to put the tape down and pull it up. So I'm going to take a piece of black cardstock, and I'm going to use the Hello sentiment from the same stamp set, and I'm going to use a powder tool here as well. This is a different one. And I'm putting that down on the cardstock, and I tend to like to put a lot of the powder tool down on black cardstock. And I'm just stamping the Hello with the Versamark ink. And then I'm going to use the same white embossing powder. And then I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. And then I'm just going to take my scissors, my large black scissors, and I'm just going to go ahead and trim that out by hand. It's such a small element, it's just a lot easier to trim it out by hand. So once I have that trimmed out, I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of foam tape, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on the back of the sentiment. And I'm going to add that over part of the flowers there along the right hand side. And then I'm just going to add some adhesive to the back of my panel, and I'm going to just attach that to a black top folding card base, and that pretty much finishes up my card for today. So I hope you guys like this. Be sure to head over to the blog to find out how you can win during our watercolor month. And I'll see you guys again next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.